So the data layer within X1 is we take all of that information from within your transactional database. That's all. That's your information within X1. Everything you created. It's the request information. It is the payments, financial, invoicing. What else is in there in the X1?
Request, operational stuff, fuelings we can throw there also, yeah.
Yep, that's another one that's in there. All that data.
Yeah, customer level data.
Exactly. Master data, exactly. We can send all of that master data.
So that all exists within basically a separate database that we take out of your X1 stuff so that somebody wants to mess with it, they can. One of the things that we've struggled with since we existed was reports. We are constantly chasing our tails on reports. No matter what report we build, somebody wants it different. They want this field over there, add this column, do this. We're always after that. So the data layer is a way for us, it allows us to create those bite-sized metrics, gives the FBOs a way to create those reports, their custom reports, however they want them. I'm going to look at the screen here real quick and talk about some of this data. Now, with the data layer, it doesn't have to be just the X1 data that we import into there. What you're looking there is the PowerBi tool that Kyle was talking about earlier. And all of the data, almost all of the data that Kyle was mentioning exists within your X1 instance. What does not exist within your X1 instance, a lot of it can be brought in. For example, if you're using Microsoft Business Central, we can create that data within the data layer. So your actual financial data, budget numbers, all that stuff can be saved in a data layer. You also have access to all the data from X1 tracks. So flight tracking data. We look at this example, and examples of dashboards is really hard to make. Like Kyle was pointing out, because have to use data to make it make sense. So you have to scramble it and make it look realistic. During this period, this quarter is how we have this set up. These FBOs, 5 locations we made up in this FBO, sold 4.9 million gallons of fuel, 22 million gallons in revenue. Our average posted price during that period was $6.45. We had 2,559 departures. We had 2,842 arrivals. I can tell you right now, if you want that bite-sized data, if you want to be able to use this stuff to make decisions, and you want to make it easier, what Jen was talking about the garbage in, garbage out, we do need our staff to make sure we're meeting some minimum standards here, that we're entering those, all the arrivals and departures. Because if you want to count that stuff, you want to count your actual request arrivals and departures, you want the data to be accurate, somebody's got to click a button that says it departed. That's all they have to do. Once we have that, we're good. We can take this data, like Kyle was pointing out, and tie it to your actual departures from within your request, tie that directly to your actual request to see that capture rate we were talking about, that fuel sales data. X1 Tracks has that same data that Kyle was talking about from TrackPack, the estimated fuel sales, all that exists there. And then the cool part about this stuff is once I start clicking on things within Power BI, I get more detail. I can drill down to a customer. I could drill down to a type. I have no idea how to use a Mac, so forgive me. So we look at this version. It's just another dashboard. Those are locations, the location amounts. Now, if I wanted to know just specifically for that location or this location. So this location, I just filtered that data down by the location. If I click back on that, I go back to the whole group. But what this is, where this really gets to though, is once you set this up once, Nobody has to maintain the spreadsheet. Nobody has to maintain the pivot tables. Nobody has to do any of that stuff. What we can do is start to make this information consumable by the GMs, where you can make it bite-sized. You can give them information that is very easy to read. If I look at this top 25 customer list I have here, and again, these are just examples that we're giving you. All the stuff that you guys imagine and ask us to do, we can actually do here. So we look at Solaris Aviation on this list here. I can see my capture rate on Solaris. I can get data that tells me that looking at that capture rate, looking at that bar being bright, I can tell right here that I'm not capturing their fuel sales, that they're coming in, paying a facility fee, and walking right out the door. There may be a reason for that. This may be set up this way in that FBO. Maybe they have a facility there, and that's why they're doing that. But the reality is, in that data, I can start to make real decisions. I get the information as a GM, as an owner, that we can drive the revenue. This is the easy button for what Kyle was talking about in metrics.
Can I make one comment?
You can make as many as you like.
Going back to what Kyle's presentation is oftentimes we're always measuring our performances based on prior year or budget, but it's a lot harder to try to figure out what can you do to improve that performance, and that just comes down to the data. Do you have customer level data, payment level data? With this tool, you can drill down to say, do I need to make any changes in my operations right now in order to, grow organic gallons or improve my margin? So, and Jim failed to tell you he created this PowerBi tool, and it took him, 30 minutes to do? So you do not have to have, your level of proficiencies.
You don't have to be that bright. That's what he's trying to say.
I wasn't saying that, but.
To set these up, it really is. If you have some, so one of the things we're doing now with this data, we have it at a level today where we just drop our tables, which is the basic structures of X1 into that information and you pull it out. That is very complicated. You have to know table relations and all kinds of other database stuff. What we're doing now with a lot of that data is we're taking them and creating these views of the data. So it is the data that you're most likely to want to manipulate. So that request, we just put it across a bunch of columns, all the details of the request. And then from there, you can build these dashboards, or you can manipulate these dashboards. Once these are built, we can give you copies of some standard dashboards, and then you guys can go in and manipulate the information you like. We'll offer you some help. We actually have a guy in our team, Juan Felipe, who's very, very good at this stuff. He could have done this in 2 seconds. Our database guys are more than willing to go back in and mine what we have for the data you may need. And we're always open to ideas. What I'd love for Khan to talk about a little bit is Khan's last position before he came to us was with Lynx. FBO chain was recently bought by Atlantic. Mm-hmm. And he was with us when he was a Landmark guy too. What would you have done with these kind of tools? What kind of metrics would you have looked at? And how would we have done that now?
That's a very interesting question, because when I was watching Kyle's presentation, it was pretty much a blueprint of what most FBOs kind of look for when they're gauging their capture rates, their performance. We were using total FBO for the 5 to 6 years that we were a 9 FBO chain. It was very painful to get to this raw data. One, just because we didn't have the ability to drill down to the actual transaction level. And then secondly, that system was not very friendly in the way we had to set up some pricing and pricing rules and customer level detail. So it just took us, it's a very painful process, and it really did need like a back office, accounting, financing type to do it. With this layer, one with X1's availability of getting to the raw data and having the ability to export it so quickly, I probably would have looked at, contract fuel is probably the topic du jour right here, is that, one of the one of the metrics we kind of looked at is how much are we getting back from our contract fuel providers versus our retail pricing strategies. I don't want to get into it in too much details just because I know that there's FBOs here that are not all at the same corporate level, but you can actually, if you look at this total, so I think the biggest question that we were always told was, we can drive gallons to your FBO. And it's very hard to quantify that just because you've got a lot of contract fuel resellers telling you that, you've got a lot of fractional folks telling you that, so who do you believe? With this type of data, you can drill it down to both the customer level, the payment type level, and then you can decide what is my margin, what is my performance based on any of that. To Jim's point, I think it's also, there was always an internal question of how do you measure the customer? Is a base customer who is a fractional tail, do you consider them a fractional customer or a base customer? Just those sorts of designation is a lot easier when you can drill down to this type of level of detail. Then you can, I hate to use the word pivot because obviously not everyone's going to be an Excel user, but you can generate the reportings of that nature so you can slice and dice it and see it however you want.
Yeah, all that data that we're talking about, every single piece of it, you can drop into this filter column. So if I wanted to filter this by specific tail numbers within here, if I wanted to filter it by specific types of aircraft, you can do all that. And all that data is available to everybody in here through your transactional database. So the next question would be what are you missing? What data do you want? In your FBO today, you have a list. You don't count. No, every time we give her one more, she asks for something else. Yeah. Which is okay. Actually, that's a big driver behind why we're taking the raw data, those raw tables, and creating the views. It makes it it'll make it much easier for Lakshmi to do her job tomorrow than it is today, because she doesn't have to create the relationships between the databases. I mean, you think pivot tables are hard. That stuff is a different level. You have to be a database admin to figure it out.
Yeah, I wanted to add that there's some complexity behind it because the data structure that we have in X1 is pretty complex. Like, we were talking with Lakshmi yesterday about pricing. Pricing in X1 is completely dynamic. So it's not like you have a table where you have all your pricing just stored there. Basically, for every invoice that you're creating, we're calling our pricing engine. Our pricing engine, based on different parameters that you provided, it's giving you back a price. So in the end, your invoice is going to save that price, that final price. But you don't have, like, give me my price for this customer, this date, saved in the database. That's all completely calculated dynamically. So we need to hide that complexity that our database has when we are giving you that information. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to get anything out of it.
So that's what these views are, and a lot of the Lakshmi's work is helping everybody because we're learning what those simpler views need to have in it. But if you look, even if you look on this one, like, that's actually a good point. This doesn't just have to be transactional. You could actually leverage other data within X1 from notes to metrics like this: last visit, last time they were here. To Khan's example, I mean, we've all had that guy that comes in, tells you you're going to buy 50,000 gallons and be there 20 times in the next, 3 months. And it's always been difficult for us to measure that. Actually, on that same note, while I'm thinking about that, there's something I've wanted to do for a long time with the price rules, is we want to hold them accountable to that. So we've actually figured out a way, we have to implement it, but we figured out a way that within the price rules, you can create a price rule based on a total volume, a tiered price rule on total volume. So if that guy tells you he's going to buy 50,000 gallons, well, we can give him a price rule for 50,000 gallons. But guess what? I'm going to tier it so that you'll get that price you wanted. But in order for that to equal that price, you have to hit that mark. Because from gallons 1 through 15,000, it's X. From 15,001 through 30,000, it's Y. And from 30,000 up, it's Z. So that's a neat little feature and a way to help hold our customers accountable.
Especially those national accounts where you're getting a promise up front and then you have to review every quarter, every year to see if they hit their standards. And I think that goes back to Kyle's dynamic pricing. Wouldn't it be wonderful to be able to calculate that based on real-time uplift and usage?
And all that data can be simply plugged in. You go, there's a little menu on the side when you're building these things. You drag that little box over that says total gallons, put it in the field you want, select what you want it to look like, and it pops it. I mean, Power BI is very, very powerful. It's simple enough that I could do it. And I can manage Excel. I'm not a pivot table guy. There's no way somebody doesn't want a piece of data to run their business.
How would you get from what we have now in X1 to that?
We turn it on. This right now within X1, this data exists for you. Every piece of every detail in here exists for you. We're more than happy to share the ones that we've already created, and you can lean on us to help with building some of these dashboards. The consultants that are out there like Kyle, I mean, the metrics that they've defined are very, very powerful. And they have, I mean, when Kyle was up, you saw that one FBO, that example he had, where that revenue per hour, $50 to 100. Anybody here doesn't want to do that?
And it is or would be exportable into Excel, right? The spreadsheet.
So there are tools that will take the Power BI data out of Power BI and put it into CSVs and spreadsheets. The point of it, though, is that you don't have to do that. So there's a few things. You can do that. You can do the analysis. The analysis is really meant to be done from the screens, more dynamic than spreadsheets. Ask all these folks. I hate the fact we don't have a printer in our office. Hate printing, hate paper tickets, all that stuff. So you have that capability. You have all this deep data analysis. What else you can do with Power BI is you can give yourself that view of the day. You can give it so that you sitting home on Saturday can pull out your phone, see what your fuel sales look like, see what your schedule for that day looks like. How many arrivals, how many departures do I have today? There's a lot of really cool things you can do, not even just on this deep analysis metric stuff, but just a snapshot into what's going on in your FBO at that moment. That data within here, actually directly from within Power BI, you could set how often you want to go get it. So if you want to get it every minute, if you want to get it every hour, just go to a setting, turn it on, and it'll go grab that data and update your dashboards.
You saw that dashboard slide?
Which one?
Look, I want to add something to your question, because in the end, what the data layer is basically another database that we give you where you have full access. So, for security reasons and other considerations, we don't give our customers direct access to the live transactional database. So what we do is, with the data layer, we are basically sending the relevant data to this other database. We give you access to it. We give you the credentials. It's basically a database that you can query in whichever way you want. And Power BI is a very good example, and it's a very strong tool. But you can use any other tool to mine that data. You can, going to your point, you can even connect through Excel, or you can just dump the data from those tables to Excel and work on them offline. Use Tableau. There's a bunch of tools out there. So if you already have, business intelligence tools that you're using, you can use that. It's just another data source that you can use.
So, two things. Going back to gallons. So, a way to integrate minimum item guarantees. So how to set up in customer profiles when you're setting up the pricing. If you're doing tiers, however. So there's so many ways to structure an agreement, right? But in terms of data, how to evaluate performance through the year based on minimum annual guarantees type of criteria. So that would be very interesting. And then going back to Kyle's type of data, how do we merge then labor into this? How do we tie in our back-end accounting to X1 so that we can actually start comparing labor hours, FTEs to performance.
Does so hooking up BC to this, which what you guys have, that's very easy. Microsoft product to Microsoft product, it's very simple. We can pull in those tables the same way we do with X1. You can. There's another slide I don't have up here where we actually put in some budget information and then compared this to budget.
Which is essentially like a daily dashboard that would auto update. So with every company I've worked for, GMs have kind of lived and died by what their projected month-end gallons are going to be, their margins are going to be. This would give you that same tool, and it would auto update.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, you're with one of the big chains. I was with one of the big chains. We had access to a lot of information. That was one of the, listen, working for a mom and pop's a trade-off versus working for a chain. They all have their advantages and disadvantages. I loved on the chain side when I was with the chains, this type of information. It made running my business so much easier. I could know things I didn't know before. I could see things I didn't see before. But, so I didn't answer your question. Give me it again.
There's two sides. So the first side is a way to input like minimal annual guarantees into like a by customer data.
Yeah, so that's a change in the price rules that we could do. Now, when you want to look at that though, let's say right now that's going to hold them accountable from a transaction point of view, right? The price rules I was talking about. From a Power BI point of view, that is very easy. You can put that customer in. Like if we look at what we have here, FlexJet selected, we have their total volume. If we added another field within our tables, that tells us what that target was, we can show you a variance to target. We can even add formulas to that field. There's something called measures that we can use within Power BI. So Kyle's exact formula that he used to run that our month prediction, you could do the exact same thing and base that off of not just, we could base off a real estimate on what they've historically been doing up to this point to give what would probably a pretty good estimate of how close they were going to be to what that target you were holding them to.
Okay, cool. That's what I was
And then
going to
the
say.
second side is
Getting
so
the
we
data
can't
through the data.
create
Okay,
something
that's
similar
the
using you're using the labor data from Business Central and to tie in into.
Yeah, are you guys putting hours into Business Central? So you are, yeah. So yeah, it needs a source, right? So whatever that source may be, whether we have ADP here somewhere, right? Where are you? Whether we're pulling it in from like ADP's data, or we're pulling it in from BC, yeah, the labor hours can be pulled in. And I'm sure within both systems, I'm not sure about BC. I know within ADP, we have classifications and stuff like that we can use to filter the data, so we make sure we're only basing it off of, customer service and line service technicians to get that number, to get the metric we want, not include us expensive people in the deal.
So does ADP tie into X1 somehow?
No, but ADP has the ability to export data. So we would export that same data into these tables to do the same thing.
But yeah, like for instance, some of the stuff that we're going to show you later regarding the fueling, what happens on the field, and if you have Cloud Connect, now that we're going to be pulling data from the register into X1, we've always had that data, but it's stayed in its own X1 Cloud Connect backend. Now we're bringing that data into X1. So with that, we can even start creating indicators about your own guys on the field. I mean, how they're performing in terms of fueling. I mean, what level of accuracy they're driving when they're entering the information into the system. That type of stuff can be easily pulled out of this once the data is there.
It's actually a really good point, because we actually do produce those reports today for some of our FBOs. If you've never seen it, it basically reports the performance of how you guys how accurate you use Cloud Connect. I know Christy's using it. That data can be put up here too, and I actually kind of like that. Think about that data up on a dashboard in your line service office. Get them to start policing each other and making fun of each other for not being able to figure out how to push a button right. I've worked up north. I started my career in Chicago, worked in New York for a long time, and the hangar wait lists were always entertaining, especially during awareness, especially when it was about to snow. and who was on what list and where and who took it. And I think we'd be interested in maybe looking at that as a possible feature within a request. You tell us that they're requesting hangar, and we just generate a list of those aircraft that are requesting hangar. Because now remember, in X1, that's more data that we didn't talk about. Within X1, we have who's familiar with Sandpiper? Who was a line guy here a long time ago? The green book. You'd flip through it and you figure out where the fuel is, how much fuel it took, all that stuff. When we first started, we actually bought that company for all that data. That data is very unique. You can't, Google where to do a lav on a G4. It doesn't exist. So all that data on that square footage and all that stuff is already within X1. So taking that and tying it, and within locations within X1, you can tell us that you have hangar 5, and hangar 5 is 40,000 square feet.
So along the same lines, because I know it's been discussed, you're almost working with the same criteria as slots, right? Of course, F1 coming around, you think about Super Bowl, F1, RPAS, whatever, special events, right? You have a lot more criteria being weighed into the hangars and other data that you're gonna, as what you just talked about. But in terms of reservations, it's similar way of logic, right, for the backend. So if you can do that, then you can do like slot systems and similar, and utilize similar logic for the same idea.
So there's a little bit of difference between that and this. We're, on the reservation side, we just want to kind of make sure we have enough space available to, when we got to cut off that waiting list, right? With the next step of that slot system and where we're going to keep, 210 airplanes over the next 4 days, that gets a little more complex. And there's some people out there working on that stuff that are really good. And again, that goes back to what I was saying before about I don't want to build every single thing. They have hangar stacks. We have 1 mile up here. Oh my God, I'm forgetting the name again. Airplex, right? I got it. Airplex back there has a really innovative product. They're doing that stacking with a little bit of technology. So we don't, right now, even in some of the other platforms, you need to have that line guy brain to figure out how that puzzle is going to work. They're applying some AI to that stack itself, how maximize the efficiency of your stack. There's some other platforms on the horizon on the real estate side of the business that I think are going to be really helpful for us to make these kinds of decisions and maximize our space during events. But again, that just goes back to, you guys already gave us about 2 years worth of work just today. So if I could...
top of the 3 years that we get from Jim.
So, when there's the opportunity to find good partners on the software side of the business that can tie into our information, and I think that's one of our advantages, is that because we're so core to you running your business, we can enable a lot of really cool other software out there now that couldn't have existed before. So, roundabout way to answer your question that I'm not going to do it, but I know somebody who can. So what else from the metric side of the house? What else? Hangar's great. Actually, that was fantastic. Even the calculations that Kyle had before, all that data exists within X1 too. So if you want a simple view of that customer's value, you can create that.
Say cycle time. So from the time that you get a fuel request to the time that the truck is on site starting to pump, how quickly that event is taking place?
Absolutely. All that data is in that IoT backend we showed you yesterday. So from the time that LST hits accept, they're saying, okay, I'm going to do this fueling, till the time they hit the start button, we can count all of that. We can count the start button. We can count from when they hit start to when the fueling is complete. You could probably even create some metrics around when they finished one to when they got the next one. That might be interesting. So Kyle and I did a little consulting for one of the FBOs in Florida, and they were having some customer service struggles. We went to the FBO, did our thing. And a very simple and quick analysis identified the fact that they didn't even have enough people on staff to fuel the number of aircraft they had. So those metrics can be, think about that decision making. And again, was that data easily available to them to figure that out? Did they even know to look for it? I mean, you do. But that's where this is going. This is trying to make that so that other people, so people with fewer resources. I mean, not everybody has the resources of a network. And that's a lot, X1's trying to give some of these independent FBOs more tools, get you on par with some of the bigger guys, and make the decision-making process easier. Anything else?
Only other thing I can think of is fuel sale upsells, any type of front of the house, giving your CSRs the incentive to upsell. With X1 tracks, if we put in fuel minimums and what the expected burn rates of the aircraft is, if it pops up that says this Gulfstream could have taken another 100 gallons, then that's the lowest hanging fruit. You can always try to upsell those guys first.
Who has a process in here for fuel upsells? Does anybody have like a built-in tool? Anybody have anything that allows their CSRs to make a decision that may bring you more revenue? So this doesn't even have to be that complicated. This was a landmark thing we did. We just built a simple spreadsheet with our fees in it. And and we can do this with the next one, that allowed some leeway for the customer service reps to make a decision to change a fuel price that would reduce the facility fee, reduce or eliminate the facility fee for that customer. So this way the customer is getting something, they're getting their fuel, instead of just paying us just for the pleasure of being there. And at the end of the day, that calculator helped make a decision that was actually more profitable for us. It resulted in more gross margin than just the facility fee would have. And the customers actually felt better about it, because again, they paid for something instead of paid for just showing up. So if anybody is interested in this, please go visit the Tech Corner. Give me your information. We'll get you with some of our folks to look at it and talk about the metrics you want to see. We'll show you the metrics that we've built so far. And we'll show you those tables and how that stuff works.